Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. Yesterday, I was doing a little bit of a consult for someone, helping them to figure out where and how they wanted to buy comics. And while I was sharing data with this person, I had a little bit of epiphany, which inspired me to create this video. The epiphany that I had is that as you look at the trend line for comics pre and post COVID, if you exclude the COVID period, it appears that the market has essentially normalized. There is a gentle slope from the left to the right that looks like a more normal market. Again, if you exclude the COVID period. But in this video, what I want to do is to take a look at just a couple of examples that I found as I was looking at books in my own collection to see whether this pattern held true. I think that I need to do some additional research to prove this out definitively, but I at least wanted to share my initial thoughts with you. With that said, let's look at some examples. All right, let's go ahead and jump into a couple of examples. And the very first book that we're going to look at is one that we have here on screen. It is Amazing Fantasy 15, a book that technically needs no introduction. We are going to look at a lower grade copy of this book because that is what I own. We are specifically going to look at a 1.0. You can see that there are 136 copies of this on the CGC census. There have been 63 sales in recent times, and this book has a fair market value of $14,000. Let's go ahead and click on this one and see what the data reveals. I'm actually going to turn off that one and make this a little bit larger so that we can actually see this hopefully a little bit better. All right, so what we're going to do first is to look at the pre-COVID period, if you will. And I've drawn the line in the sand here at December 2020. So in December of 2020, this book was averaging $8,954.99. All right. We are essentially going to exclude what I'm calling the pandemic period, which in this case is any sales that happened between January 2021 all the way to if we can find it, November of 2023. All right. And the high water mark during that period, or I shouldn't say high water mark, let me not even go there because that's about to complicate matters. So I'm excluding that COVID period. All right. So the last sale for this book was $16,000, and that was in December of 2024. There have been no sales at a 1.0 in 25. I feel like using that last value of 16,000 might not be the way to go. So what I decided to do was to average the last three sales. And you can see here down at the bottom, the last three sales were $16,000, $11,100, $14,400. And so the average of those three sales turns out to be $13,833. That is the average of the last three sales, which occurred in the last few months of 24. So if we compare the price of this book in December of 2020, roughly $9,000 versus the average that we just looked at of $13,833. That is an increase of 31% increase from December 2020 to basically, what did I say? The end of 24 is basically what we're talking about. So like a 4-year period, 31% increase. All right. So that averages out. If you just, I guess you can do that math, right? Just rough math, 31% divided by 4, 7.75% per year. That is the per year average. Just again, rough math that I'm using there. All right. So that is how this book has performed. If you exclude the COVID period, right? And essentially, if you draw a line from 2020 to basically where this book is now, right? And you exclude the COVID period, which are those spikes in there, what you essentially see is a gentle, gradual slope up and to the right. That's kind of what you want to see in a normal market, right? Again, if you take out these peaks up here at the top, right, where this book was selling for $30,000 in February of 2022, if you take that out, you're looking at a gentle slope up and to the right, roughly 31% over a 4-year period, which comes out to be about, again, 7.75%. So how does that period, excluding COVID, compare to the previous period if you went earlier in the timeline? So what I did is, this was our line in the sand, which was December 2020. That was our starting point. I backed up to February of 2018. It's back all the way February of 2018. So almost 2 years, 10 months or so, if my math is correct. Backing up from that, in February 2018, this book was selling for $6,355.50, like on average. That's what we were looking at. And we just saw in December of 2020 that the book had increased to, went too far. I think I went too far right there. It had increased to $8,955 in essence. That period, that is a 41% increase. Again, February 18 to December 2020, 41% increase. When you look from December 2020 to the present day, if you will, present day being the end of 24, you're looking at a 31% increase. So increasing, yes, maybe more dramatically in the past than it is right now, which tells us a couple of things, right? Again, up and to the right, no crazy swings, right? Gentle increase. I think that is a good sign. It's a good sign in a lot of different ways. Maybe, again, the market has normalized a little bit, stabilized just a little bit, still increasing, but not doing any type of crazy stuff. Might also be a great opportunity to potentially buy, just because of what we kind of painted there. So let me share another screen here. I'm actually going to look at another example. This one is going to be X-Men issue number 1. This is another comic that I own. I purchased this years ago, so it was on my mind. So let's go ahead and look at this one. Again, another book that really needs no introduction. Let's blow it up here so you guys hopefully can see that a little bit better. I'm going to get rid of that data point, and we are going to look at the 5.0 because this is what I actually own. All right, so we're going to look at September 2020. September 2020, this book was selling for $8,500. Okay, we are going to exclude the COVID period, right? The COVID period, which I'm saying ran from January 2021 to December of 2023, when the average price in December of 2023 was $13,200. So I'm excluding that period, okay? So if you go from September here, September 2020, to where we are right now, most recent average price for this book, $11,078. $11,078 is basically where we are. If you compare September 2020 to where we are now, the average, again, you can see here, there's 2 books that have sold for that. That's why that's averaging out. That is a 30% increase. 30% increase if you exclude the COVID period. What you see there is when you average that out over the 4 years, right, 2021 through 2024, you're looking at a 7.5% increase per year. Again, very similar to the first book we looked at. Coincidentally, nothing crazy. But again, if you draw a line from September 2020 to where we are now, it is a gentle slope in many ways. Here, let me make that a little bit bigger if I can. Yeah, it is like a gentle slope from over here to over here, up and to the right. If you exclude all this crazy stuff that happened in the middle, all the COVID stuff, it's not bad. It's a 30% increase. But let's back up. Let's back up and let's look at January 2018. January 2018, this book was selling for $5,200. And we compare that $5,200 in January of 2018 to where we started in September of 2020, that would be between those two dates a 63% increase, right? So again, the values that we're seeing now are not terrible in comparison maybe to the percent increase that we've seen in the past. Maybe also again a sign of things kind of normalizing, but also potentially a sign that it's not necessarily a bad time to buy if you're in a position to do so. If that's what you want to do, these are my observations that I'm kind of sharing with you guys. All right, so we're going to look at one more example here, and it is going to be this book right here. It is Giant Size X-Men issue number 1, specifically the 7.5. Why the 7.5? That is the one that I own. And again, this stuff was fresh on my mind, so that's why we're going to be looking at these numbers. I'm going to blow this up a little bit bigger, hopefully so that you guys can see this. And we're going to jump into January 2020. January 2020. All right. In January of 2020, this book was selling for $1,607.50. If we exclude the COVID period, which again, in this case, runs from January 2021 all the way through December 2023. And thankfully, we have good data here. We're going to exclude that. We're going to exclude that. And if you, again, look at where we were, January 2020, where if I can find it again, January 2020, right there, $1,607.50 versus essentially where we are right now at $24.45. That is a 52% increase, 52% increase. And if you divide it by 4 years, right, so 2021 through 2024, that is a 13% increase per year. That might seem like a lot, right? Might seem like a lot. Potentially it is, but let's look at the pre-COVID period and see what happens there. Let's go all the way back to January of 2018. January 2018, this book was selling for $922.42. Now we compare that to this price right here, $1,607.50. That is a 74% increase. 74% increase. And if you divide it by 2 years, because that's essentially what we're talking about, January 18 to January 2020, 2 years, that is a 37% increase per year. And again, I throw these numbers out there just to provide a little bit of context for what we're talking about. And again, if you just get rid of the COVID period, right? Let me go back to January. Get rid of the COVID period, right? And if you put a piece of paper on the screen, what you will see if you go from January 2020 to where we are right now, it is a gentle slope up and to the right if you exclude the COVID period. To me, it is looking more like a normal market if you get rid of all the COVID stuff. Which I think is a good thing, right? COVID was crazy. There is no doubt about it. We've seen it in every single example that we've looked at, these massive spikes that happened during the COVID time. That was a lot of noise. That was a great time, again, to sell a book if you happen to have one. Maybe not the best time to actually buy a book. And I can tell you for a fact that I bought several books during that time period, several of which are actually underwater, like my Hulk #1. But there are instances where if you bought a book pre-COVID and you held on to that book, you're not in a terrible place right now. You're really not in a terrible place. And so if you bought before and you held, you're not in a bad place. But again, let's say that you don't have these books, right? If you don't have what do we look at? Amazing Fantasy 15, X-Men 1, and Giant Size X-Men. Let's say that you don't have these books. This is also, again, as I've said a few times, not necessarily a bad time to buy. The books are not nearly as expensive as they were during the COVID period, and they look not so different, if you will, from the pre-COVID period, at least in my opinion. You know, you could even say that the rate of the value increasing is actually a little bit lower than the pre-COVID period, but there's all kinds of factors at play which complicate that math, at least in my mind, with being able to definitively say some of that. But it's interesting data. I put it out there for you all to think about and to consider. At the end of the day, your money, your decision, your collection, you decide what you want to do. But I thought that this was interesting data that I wanted to share with you guys. I'm going to take a look at some additional books. I've looked at a handful already. I'm going to take a look at some additional books to see what that data may show. And I would say if you found this video interesting, and if you're interested in maybe me having a look at some additional books, let me know what issues, what grades you might want me to look at, and potentially we'll do another video and include some of that data in there. With that said, we're going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I want to invite you to do that as well. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do it on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
Turn me up in my headphones a little bit, like I want to feel it, I want to hear it. All right, that's it right there. I spoke. When the sun rise, till it's burned out. No place to recharge, so we gotta learn how. Conversations with OGs, they got dreams that never worked out. So they become masters of dream analysis. They come in the form of barbers and schizos. Warhead with a big nose with his lip.